This is a video about the import and export features of the Scrap Mechanic Logic Gate simulator. Now there are these two buttons here. This one's the import, or this one is the import here, and this one is the export. Now, to get this done, it's kind of an involved process, and you might want to, there's a help section here, which gives you a step-by-step way to do it. So this video will just walk through that process and show some of the caveats and gotchas that you might want to be aware of. So, we'll start in the game here. And what I've got on my list here is a bunch of circuits that we were using for demonstration purposes in the previous video. Now it has this, which is just a loop of logic gates meant to illustrate some behaviors in the game. And this is an SR flip-flop. We do that, and these are just switches connected to pistons, and this is your classic timer design here. So anyway, so let's do this. So what we want to do is get a build on the left and save it. Now it's important that you not save it, as anything you might might want to not be prepared to lose. Just give it a new name, or save it to the default unnamed or something like that. So there we go. Okay, so now we'll go back into the simulator, and we're going to go and press the import. Now the thing with this is that it's going to be in your blueprints folder, which is hard to find, but if you go percent app data percent Axelot Scrap Mechanic user gobbledygook blueprints, and again this thing is just a bunch of garbage, but what I like to do is use the date modified, and so the most recently modified one is going to be the one we just touched. So there we are, that's the blueprint we want, and sure enough, here it is, it's imported. Now, there are a couple of things that have gone a little bit wrong, mostly having to do with, it's just kind of crammed stuff together, maybe a little too close. So we'll have to, pull it apart a bit. It's not going to be very uncommon, but there you go. And then another thing, which is a little bit more subtle, let's start with the fact that the switches and the pistons are just completely missing from this picture. And that's because there's kind of no logic there, right? It attempts to trim out anything that it sees as not, important to, the business of, the reason why you're doing it is because you have a complicated circuit that you're trying to get a handle on. So one of the other things that it did was on this guy, which is a single input here, in Scrap Mechanic was actually a switch and a button connected to a logic gate, and it decided to smush that all into a single input for the purposes of this. So basically, anytime you have a switch or an input of any sort going into a logic gate where there's nothing else going into the logic gate but the switch, it's going to smush it down into a single input. It's going to smush everything from the logic gate onward into that piston. Into that input. So that's the story with import. So let's get ready to export. So I'll just have to take this off the lift, so our lift is free to do other mischief. So what we'll have to do is go back to the Scrap Mechanic Logic Gate Simulator, and let's load up something that we want to export. Let's go with this guy is reasonably complex. Okay, and we're going to export it. Now, happily, it just dumped me here in the same folder I was in before, which is the blueprints folder of the one that I wanted. I just showed all the files to illustrate that there's a third file in here called icon.ping, and that contains a thumbnail, which is, I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. The description file we don't touch, and that contains basically just the name of the build, and then the blueprint. That's the big money. So yeah, we're going to replace that, pop back into the game, and because I was already looking at the blueprint called unnamed, here it is. Now, if we had to search for it, then we would get this experience where you see this one is actually the one that we just exported, even though it doesn't look right here, and that's because the blueprint, or I'm sorry, the icon.png file is the one from what we saved it as. So don't be fooled. Everything is, if you see the goodness here, then you know you've done it. You've done it right. So there we go. We got our build here, and it is indeed just as it was in the game. I'm sorry, in the simulator. Plus or minus a few little things. Yeah, that's, if we notice here, we have a row of 3 buttons, but they're all on top of logic gates. And here there's just the 3 buttons. Now, what the exporter did there was figure that you weren't going to be happy with just switches, and you never know. I mean, if an input is connected to 4 things, how are we going to do that? And without having you have to like rewire everything. And so what it does is every input is replaced by a logic gate and a button. And the vision is that you would take the circuit board, if you will, that you got out of the export and weld it onto some creation, and then maybe lose these buttons, and then instead use your connect tool to hook this logic gate up to your sensors or whatever. And if at some point you decide that the circuit board needs replacing, then you would rebuild it, or you just take this main board out of your build, delete it, import a new one, and weld it into place, and then not have that much to you know to deal with your connect tool, because connect tool is where things really can get difficult on a big thing like this. Now, there is no similar idea of outputs. Maybe there should be. Uh, there is another thing that it tries to do is replicate the layout that was in the simulator on in the export, and I kind of am wondering if that's really the right thing to do in practice. I think it might be better to crunch all these logic gates down to a minimum amount. And since we're editing blueprint files, one of the things you can do if you are uh, so inclined would be to actually, you can, in a blueprint file, all of these, if you open up the file, it's a text file. You can open up and you'll see a thing called pos everywhere, and that pos is the XYZ coordinates of the object. And if you want to, you can change those guys so that all the logic gates, for instance, are just stacked up together into a single block, and so we can make something really, really tight to stick into builds with this. Now, obviously, I think our inputs and outputs, we'd have to find a way to make sure that they were all busted out into their own piece, but could be done. So, and again, if you got any ideas about how to make it better, feel free to share them either in the comments of this video, or better yet, go over to the, the GitHub page for this project and open an issue there. So anyway, hope this was helpful to you, and thanks for watching.